Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO for COABE, and it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters today, Jenny Malika and Peter Simon with High Road Alliance. I want to just say something quickly before I pass it over to them. We've worked with them on the Center of Excellence in Apprenticeship, which was funded through Department of Labor, and they did some great work there, and they have been a wonderful partner. So we're really grateful they're here, and they will be leading the panel in the session that's taking place today. So I'll turn it over to them. But happy National Apprenticeship Day from COABE.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and we're very glad. Jenny, you're going to open up the PowerPoint. Okay, great. Here we go. So we're really excited to be able to address the topic of collaboration between adult education and apprenticeship. We have been working very actively in this space. And, and confirmed by the number of people who signed up for this webinar, is there's clearly a great deal of interest in this topic around the country. So we're very excited. And Jenny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Really happy to be here. Happy about your interest in this topic, which is very, very close to our hearts. Peter and I work together with a number of sites across the country and are just so excited to share with you some of the great examples of the work we see happening. Welcome.
And we have some of the panelists here already. Gustavo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name is Gustavo Sanchez. I'm a faculty at the Santa Rosa Junior College, and I work with Peter and Golden Gate Transit Union to teach the pre-apprenticeship bus operator program at our college.
And Rich Diaz from Amalgamated Transit Union, please.
Hi, everyone. Happy National Apprenticeship Day. My name's Rich Diaz. I work for ATU International, formerly at Golden Gate Transit as their apprenticeship coordinator. Like Gustavo said, worked alongside Gustavo and Peter to help develop apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs there.
Wonderful. And Araceli is joining us, who's Gustavo's partner in crime at Santa Rosa Adult Ed. Please.
Hi, everyone. As Peter has just said, my name is Araceli Vasquez. I'm an outreach specialist working for the Adult Education Program at Santa Rosa Junior College, as well as the Sonoma County Adult Education Consortium. It's my pleasure to be with you all today.
And Heather, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Peter.
Please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Sharp. I am the Assistant Director of the Adult ESL, IELCE, which is Integrated English Language and Education. I believe that's what the acronym stands for, at HopeWorks in Memphis. And we have been collaborating. I've gotten to be the liaison collaborator between General Odds Body for our pre-apprenticeship with IUPAT.
And you are located where?
Memphis, Tennessee.
Thank you. And I think George said he's going to be a little late, so we'll let him introduce himself when he arrives. Okay. Jenny, please.
Yeah, so we have about an hour together today, and we wanted to spend really just, Peter and I, just spend the first 10 minutes or so really talking about why we find this collaboration between adult education and apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs to be so important, so valuable. We're going to kind of make the case for you and share with you our thinking about why it's so important. And then following quickly after that, we're going to move to our panel. And that's where you're going to really hear some examples of what it's taken to build some of these programs that are now operating successfully. With a real emphasis there on what it takes to do it. I think we're sensitive to, we often hear these stories about these wonderful programs and we're just bewildered. How did this happen? And these are not simple programs. They're often quite complex, bringing all the partners together. So we're going to hear really some very sort of practical stories about what it took to make these work. And hopefully that will spark a lot of questions from you all. We see you're already very active in the chat, which we like. And we hope that you'll continue to use the chat to post questions throughout the presentation. And then as we get into the panel, please post your questions and we'll have some time following the panelist responses to have a little discussion there. From the panelists, you're going to hear some excellent examples of how these programs have come together. And our hope is really that that inspires more of these partnerships that we find to be so valuable. So who are we? Before we get into the stories we want to tell today, just to let you know, Peter and I are a small partnership, High Road Alliance. We formed in 2021, really focused on helping to develop more what we call equitable career pathway programs, pathways that are accessible at the front end, including accessible to adult education students. It's a primary audience we care about in building these strong career pathway programs. And then we want them to lead to good quality jobs, which is one of the reasons why we've been so interested in focusing on apprenticeship.
Okay, let me just quickly put in the chat. So you can see on the screen, and I put links to these documents in the chat as well. I'm going to actually start on the right. Is back a ways when we were just starting High Road Alliance, my partner Jenny Malika published in the COAID Journal an article here on the right, which you can find on the COAID website, I assume, about opening doors to English language learners. And we started with the goal really of saying, can we pull off creating more avenues for English learners to get into apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs? And we're really happy today to basically share the fruits of that labor. So we also, and all of this is also available on our website. We developed the Equitable Apprenticeship Toolkit with the California community colleges and also with the California adult education program. We crafted a series of briefs, including one you see here on immigrant integration, which we encourage you to take a look at all those and also to look at our website. All of our stuff is there. Jenny.
Okay. So we wanted to give you just a quick overview. I'm sure many of you are familiar. We don't want to spend a lot of time, but it is important to sort of start with being on the same page about what are we talking about when we talk about apprenticeship. And this isn't the sort of definition you see in the federal documents so much as it's what we think we need to focus on as adult education providers in understanding why this model could be a fit for our students. Because an apprenticeship is really a full-time job. It's an earn while you learn model, and it is job training, but you're also being paid. And for many of our students, that's just so essential, as we know. So it's an opportunity to learn while supporting yourself and your family, and to learn while working in a job that really could be your career. The training itself is a very structured and regulated pathway. It includes classroom instruction and includes on-the-job training. And that is by definition the components of an apprenticeship. And this builds toward completion of an industry recognized certificate or credential along with the apprenticeship certificate. The other important thing we want to point out is that this apprenticeship is a very formal partnership between industry, which can include employers, it can also include labor unions, education partners providing some of this classroom instruction, and often the government. If it's a registered apprenticeship, it's registered with your state apprenticeship office and likely registered with the Federal Department of Labor.
And I'm just going to briefly address what we mean when we talk about pre-apprenticeship. I'm not going to read this definition to you. The key thing here is that when we talk about pre-apprenticeship, we're talking about one that's linked to a registered apprenticeship, one that actually not only trains people in some of the preparatory skills, but leads to at least a guaranteed interview. You can't say it leads to a guaranteed job. Life is more complex than that. And I just want to say that we're going to hear from our two different sets of panelists today who are going to talk about very effective pre-apprenticeships where it's again a partnership between adult education and pre-apprenticeship and the industry.
Great.
Next.
Just a clarification. There's a question, are apprentices working 40 hours a week and attending classes, or are classes part of the full-time job? The on-the-job training is most definitely part of the full-time job, but classes are typically beyond that workday, squeezed in. So just before we go further, we just wanted to share with you a visual that's in our Equitable Apprenticeship Toolkit. Peter showed you the image of the cover of the toolkit that High Road Alliance created. This is a framework that we use to kind of emphasize that when we ensure equity as part of our vision and our practice in apprenticeship, we're not just looking at a recruitment plan. We're really looking at building it into the program. And that's where, for us, adult education plays a huge role because we're often integrating some additional basic skills education, or we're building in English as a second language support, or some job readiness supports. The integrated education and IELCE models sort of are conducive to some of this. And just having an adult education partner able to say, this is what's going to make this apprenticeship program and every step to get into it and every step further in a career really accessible for those we know as our adult education students.
So we're going to get, we're again going to hear a lot about this from our panelists. But if we go to the next slide, in terms of what specifically is the role for adult education with apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship, and I don't normally read PowerPoint slides, so I'm just going to quickly touch on these. In this list, it's both, as Jenny mentioned, recruitment, designing pre-apprenticeship and delivery. Importantly, and we're going to hear about this in a minute, contextualizing English language and basic skills, using the integrated and education approach so that it's really accessible to the participants. Often there are soft skills, very importantly, digital literacy skills, particularly if you're going to be doing some of your pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship online, which is happening more and more. Integrating support services. Many of these programs we're looking at in the pre-apprenticeship world are drawing upon WIOA Title II funds and other state education adult ed sources. And finally, often they also can play in connecting to more other career education, CTE training, and opportunities. Next.
So we really want to sort of push this webinar forward to our amazing examples that you're going to hear in the panel. But we really want to make this statement strongly that there's such a huge value of adult education collaborating with a registered apprenticeship or a pre-apprenticeship. And we really believe that together these partners can be the key to making these programs accessible to adult learners. And these programs being very strong, high quality training, leading to high quality jobs that lead to high quality careers. So we need all of the key ingredients to make this possible, and adult education is one of those key ingredients.
So again, the focus of this webinar is not only what was created, but how have we done it? And just to go to the next slide, again, we're going to hear from two different partnerships. And just to emphasize, you're not alone. We get contacted often by adult education providers basically saying, how do we start? I don't have any idea where to even begin. So hopefully this webinar will give you some insights on how to make those steps. There's all kinds of folks out there you can partner with, your local workforce board, many times the economic development state or locally, industry associations, clearly employers and unions, and community-based organizations are often very active, the latter in these pre-apprenticeship programs. Get yourself at the design table, and you have to form these new relationships. And I just want to add that we talk a lot when we're out in the world about these programs. It really is a win-win-win for everybody, both for obviously the participants and students, but for the employers, the union, for the industry at large, and for the education providers, because it provides you not only a number of students, but access to the whole world of job training. Next.
So we just wanted to lay this out on one slide separately, that there are, as you embark on designing or planning for an apprenticeship program, there are a few key points that it's really important for those partners at the table that Peter just described to understand. One of them is what we think of as sort of the messages that we can hear from the local workforce development board or economic development, what are industry, what are the hiring and training needs in the region? And that's, your labor market information, who's going to be hiring, what sort of training do people need to get into those jobs? But the other important part, and this is also highlighted in that equitable apprenticeship toolkit that we put together, is it's so important to understand what are going to be some barriers to apprenticeship entry faced by workers in the region, faced by the adults who might be candidates to fill these jobs. It might not be enough to just start offering some advanced training. There might need to be steps in, and those barriers need to be understood at the outset. Often, if adult education is not at the table, those barriers, which might be things like, well, people don't really speak English well enough to enter this apprenticeship, or people are going to need to have their high school diploma or GED, and we're finding a lot of people don't. Those barriers might be unsurmountable, but when adult education is there, we've got answers. I think you were going to do this.
Yeah, do you want me to do this? This one's a little redundant, but just follow what Jenny just said, is that, again, adult education adds a great deal of value to this whole equation. That oftentimes adult ed providers are very experienced in addressing the barriers, some of the barriers Jenny just mentioned. You bring the expertise in the basic skill instruction, things that often the apprenticeship instructors with these training programs are not really familiar with how to address, particularly language needs. You bring in, of course, your experienced instructors who talked about contextualizing skills so that it's accessible, getting people ready for work, and as we mentioned also before, accessing WIOA Title I funds so that when you show up with these public resources, then the union does not have to come up with additional funds, or the labor management partnership, or the employer, whoever is putting on the apprenticeship, and then it's part of that win-win. And we're going to hear about it in a minute, but also you can recruit some of your adult ed students into these great jobs. So I'll leave it at that. We're now going to move to the panel, and I'm very happy that we're going to hear from the Santa Rosa bus operator pre-apprenticeship. I'll just say that I was very involved in helping to build this program, that they used our toolkit, which really warms my heart, to really use the tools around identifying barriers, and I think you'll hear about what they did in response to that. And it's very much a partnership between, as you see, the Amalgamated Transit Union, the Golden Gate Transit, and Santa Rosa Junior College Adult Ed.
And the other program we're going to hear from on this panel is in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's a partnership between the International Painters and Allied Trade Union, which is across the U.S. and Canada, and HopeWorks. So you'll be hearing from them. High Road Alliance has had the great pleasure of working with IUPAT across the country because of their interest primarily in partnering with adult education. So they've made leadership level commitments to addressing the needs of English language learners and people with other basic skills needs, and we're doing that through adult ed partnerships. So with that, I think we're ready to turn to some panelist questions. And we're going
I just want to quickly ask, is George is with us yet? Not yet. We're waiting for one panelist who came.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, okay, great. Go ahead, Jenny. Sorry.
Well, we'll include George as he comes. Fortunately, we have Heather here talking about that program in Memphis as well. Our thought was to pose each of these questions and go program by program. So here are some responses from the Santa Rosa group, then from the Memphis group, maybe on the next one here from the Memphis group, and then the Santa Rosa group. So we'll get to hear a little bit from each of these two programs. And I think we'll start with the first question. It's just really describing, these are both pre-apprenticeship programs. If you could describe briefly the pre-apprenticeship program that you developed, the partners involved, and any outcomes to date. And we can start with our Santa Rosa group.
Please.
Want to take it off, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can go ahead and start this off. You know, I
Please.
wish, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, I wish I could take all the credit for this, but you know, it really was a collaboration of you know, all of our partners. And just to give you a quick background, our pre-apprenticeship is in the transit industry for bus operators. The partnership, you know, with the agency Golden Gate Transit, our local union ATU 1575, our adult ed partners, you know, Santa Rosa Junior College, as well as the College of Marine, you know, support from California Transit Works, which, you know, Peter is a part of, and many other stakeholders, including community-based organizations, you know, really helped develop this program. You know, it really was to address some of the needs we had towards recruitment and retention. And, you know, when we talk about outcomes, man, Peter, you said it, you know, it's a triple win for everyone, right? You know, we have a new direct pipeline to different demographic of workers. It creates exposure to the transit industry. It gives job readiness and it better prepares a better developed workforce, right? And not only that, but you know, it's helped us internally as an agency to help coordinate and bring you know, these programs, like I said, to a whole different demographic, and you know, helping us coordinate, you know, not only locally but now internationally to be able to bring these programs, you know, across the nation. Stava, you want to, Araceli, you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah. I think first for us as an education institution, it's identifying, you know, our population. We in adult education, most of our populations, it's primarily Spanish speakers. We do have bilingual people, and then we have monolingual English speakers. But it's just working with the agencies, Golden Gate and the unions, primarily Golden Gate, to identify how to market to the people that they are looking for, how to work together to design curriculum, which at the junior college, we have a workforce development non-credit certificate. And what we did is we collaborated with Golden Gates and all of our partners to integrate the curriculum specifically for Golden Gate into this non-credit certificate to align it with what the students needed to learn to move on to the apprenticeship program. And in the first semester, we started with 5 classes, and then the first cohort, excuse me. And then after the second cohort, we reconvened and we reduced it to 3 classes instead of 5. Now it's 3, to prepare the students and just, you know, make the program a little bit shorter than the first cohort and make it more a little fast paced, so that the students can be ready and prepared to move to the apprenticeship quickly. We also identified that, you know, in the beginning we had to meet very often. It's like pretty much it was like a weekly meeting to work together to identify other obstacles, which we'll probably cover in the second question. But Araceli, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we're good for that. I mean, we'll go into more detail with the other questions.
That's good. Thank you so much.
Heather.
I think we can go on to hear from Heather on this one question and then sort of delve further, as you said, Araceli. Heather, would you like to introduce your program? Great.
Sure. So at HopeWorks, we are an adult education program. We have HiSET in our adult education side, and we have ESL classes. And we, on the ESL side, have been struggling with finding workforce opportunities, ways to develop job skills, job readiness for people who are already employed full-time. They often have a master's degree, or they have 15 years of experience in wherever they came from. This pre-apprenticeship program that we were able to develop with IUPAT has given us a place to start it's a scaffold. It's got some structure. People can come in. They came for about 8 weeks. We had classes Monday and Wednesday and several Saturday sessions. We provided the location and a co-teacher, and IUPAT provided someone with the specific job skills, industry-related knowledge. They collaborated, they taught class together. We provided, like we recruited from our student body, we recruited from the community, and it was a pretty successful 8 weeks. Most of our students are Hispanic. We have about 70% who are Spanish speakers from a variety of countries. But this cohort ended up being about 50-50 Spanish speaking. And then we had a mix of Arabic and Persian speaking. It was a learning experience, but our goal was to provide a specific training with a clear path to employment, and that they would be able to receive some type of useful certification. The option for them, they got OSHA 10. That was something that they were able to receive if they participated in the required number of classes. And this has, it's a very positive step for us because we're trying to break into that pre-apprenticeship model. I've tried to make contacts with other unions in the area and it just hasn't really worked out. But this one, we had about 12 participants and I think we had 10 who attended regularly and were able to complete the course.
That's great. Thank you. So, and again, George will join us and he will talk about their role with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Maybe go on to the second question. And this is kind of really core to the message of this webinar, which is we'd like all of you to talk about how you successfully got together, because people often say, so how do we do this? How do we even get involved with the employers and with the training, possibly the union? Okay, so how did you successfully partner and collaborated between the existing apprenticeship program and your adult education organization? Who would like to jump in?
I can start off for Santa Rosa Junior College.
Yes.
I think the key to our success, as Gustavo mentioned earlier, was meeting frequently, very early on before we launched. You know, I think there was a lot of people involved, like maybe more than should have been, but I think that was necessary for us to figure out who really needed to be at the table and who was going to be doing what. So we were meeting, gosh, like once a week, early on. And aside from that, there was sub meetings, you know, there was like a curriculum group that they focused on developing and fine-tuning that curriculum. There was an advisory group, and then there was the working group, which included myself and Gustavo here and a whole bunch of other people from the different agencies involved. But that was really key, just having constant communication and meeting frequently made a difference. And once we were able to launch, which for us was in fall of 2022, you know, we kept fine-tuning things and making modifications as we went. Like Heather mentioned, this is a huge learning curve. It is a beast to take on, but it is very rewarding and it is really a win-win-win type of situation. And you know, just allowing yourself that grace to be able to make modifications as you're launching your programs, because there's no way that you're going to get it perfect the first time. Even if you're following somebody else's model, you're more likely than not are going to have to make some sort of modification along the way. But again, communication is key here.
Rich Diaz, can you say something about the role of the peer mentors in the pre-apprenticeship and developing the program?
I can, but before we do, I'm just gonna definitely just confirm what RSLE said. You know, it really is, communication is a big part of it. and not just, not just in Zoom, but, in person.
Yeah.
And when we talk, it's not just about the program and how we can make the program better, but essentially how we can make the lives of the students better. What can we do? These are the more important conversations that we have, right? Outside of the meetings that we have. I know typically, when we're in person, we're giving updates on, how students are doing. Because Araceli and Gustavo, they're involved from the beginning to the end, right? And they really do. I think what's made it really successful is really, on the adult ed side, and I give them a lot of credit for this, is they put themselves in the students' shoes, right? What do the students need? What do the instructors need? What do the operators need? And really, and that was our approach in really helping to build the pre-apprenticeship, and not just saying, hey, you know what, we're going to take this as an educational approach and we're going to do it this way. They didn't generalize. It was very, specific, and they understood that. I think that's what's made our program very successful. Is because it fits what we need, right? And they're able to tailor it so that way the students become successful. And to your point, Peter, using our mentors as subject matter experts and eventually as journey level trainers really do, that's part of the success. And having a team and the mentors that really support the program goes a long way. And there's a lot of behind the scenes, the people that work behind the scenes to make this happen. I think a lot of times that doesn't get mentioned, but like I said, one of the outcomes from having a pre-apprenticeship is having the mentors be involved, having them, when we say mentors, these are the operators who are the journey level trainers, right? To show you exactly what it is that you're going to get yourself into before fully committing to this career. And I actually, Gustavo, who's, been a part of the program for a while now, we consider him as an honorary operator, right? So, as well as, Araceli, because they understand, they get it, right? And I think that's the big part is they get it, and you might ask, what is the it, is what is it that, an operator is going to go through? What is it that, the people, the students that they know best are going to need to succeed?
Yeah. I quickly want to add a couple seconds. I put it in the chat, but if you're a community college or a junior college, definitely involve your department chairs, your VPs, your anybody in the higher ups in your college, because this is a great program, and it is important for them to understand what a positive impact and how we are creating a path to a career, not just a path to a job or a certificate. As Rich said, I'm glad to be an honorary operator. They don't want me behind the bus, but it is a lot of the pre-apprentices that have gone through our program. They are making it. They are. I mean, they're seeing they're harvesting what they planted, right? And so they're working hard, and they're already enjoying the fruits of their labor.
Thank you. Heather, can you speak, and hopefully George will join us at some point, but just how did you create this partnership with the District Council 58?
So I'm going to echo a lot of what Araceli and Rich said. It's communication. And then this is a point that I can address further when we're talking questions 3 and 4, but some of it was just luck. It was luck and timing. And I work for a religious nonprofit, and in our conversations, it has often been described as a blessing that we were able to create this partnership, this particular collaboration with IUPAT and the local, because the communication aspect, we frequently, like, we never really traveled anywhere. If we wanted to have meetings and not just do a Zoom or have email chains flying back and forth and being moderated by our contact with the Department of Labor, the Workforce Development Office, they would come to us. We had people driving down from Missouri. They would drive from Nashville, and we are very grateful for that. It's a lot of communication, having people who are committed to your goals. You agree on the goals, the mission of your collaboration. You have similar ideas, or that communication and being able to meet and discuss what is it you hope to accomplish, being on the same page about everything, and then just making sure that you communicate when is this happening, what are our resources, who is available. For this first pilot, our debut program, HopeWorks provided the facilities. We provided a co-teacher. She's bilingual. She's fluent in Spanish. That didn't end up being important in the same way as it could have been if we had recruited from a different community, or if we just had different timing. Our student body, the demographics can change rapidly, and we may go from having multiple classes that are full of it's only Spanish speakers to we have lots of French speakers, and then people who speak a variety of African languages and Russian and Korean. And this we had George as our co-teacher and Joy Garcia as the ESL teacher. They were able to collaborate really well. Flexibility is key. And I will say, I can discuss this a little more with the other questions. Flexibility when you are discussing things with your partners, the organization, the people who are actually holding the class, but maybe not discussing some of that flexibility with the students, because you want to make sure that they are dedicated and attending regularly. We don't charge anything. There are no fees for any of our programs or the materials. And students may join and they may think that they're going to be able to attend regularly, and then their buy-in's just not the same. And if you miss one class, it can be really easy to just miss 2 or 3 or 4, but then you don't have enough class time to get your OSHA 10 certification. So it was communication and flexibility. We tried to be as simple in the design as possible. We went through the state standards of what it would take to have this program, the pre-apprenticeship, approved. And we tried to say, what are the basics that we need? What does IUPAT want? This is part of that, being on the same page. What's our goal? And how can we accomplish that in the amount of hours that we have planned? And again, this is part of that luck. HopeWorks we have partnerships with a few different organizations like schools and churches around Memphis that give us some flexibility in terms of location. If you have your own set dedicated space that is always available for things like that, that can be very helpful. But these are also discussions that we've had with IUPAT in terms of will they have a facility available for our next cohort in Memphis? Yeah, it's lots of communication and luck and timing and dedicated staff members. Yeah.
Great.
I would just like to jump in for 1 sec in terms of, I'm looking at the chat and there's a number of questions about how do you get started? Where do you even make the first call to make these things happen? And I'll just throw out that it's often a third party like High Road Alliance, or in the case of Tennessee, it was someone at the adult ed at the labor agency that made the connection. These are not relationships that just naturally occur. And so just to point out that we'd be happy to talk with any of you or kind of guide you to your local resources. But sometimes there sort of needs to be a bit of matchmaking to make these connections happen. So don't fret, there is help out there, and we'd be glad to talk with you.
Well, and
Just
I might add at this point that, and Heather, I don't know if you want to mention this briefly, but in the case of Memphis, Tennessee, the State Department of Labor played a really important role. They had a vision for expanding pre-apprenticeships, and they had a vision for doing that through adult education partnerships. So they were available to sit down and to create the integrated education and training plan for approval at the state level and really kind of help to walk through that process. I don't know, Heather, if you want to add a word or two about that.
The Department of Labor, Workforce Development, our adult education programs, they are really trying to focus on ways that we get people who are trying to, so ours, it's English language. For the other side of our adult education program, it's your high school equivalency. And the push is, how do we provide people with upskilling? How do we get them certifications they need? How do we get them on a track that will lead directly to a specific type of job in a specific industry? Because it can be overwhelming. It's too much to just say, well, you have your high school diploma, or well, you've reached advanced level in your English proficiency, and I know you have this background, so go. The state has been putting in a lot of effort into helping their adult education organizations find ways to do the integrated education, like the IETs, the other workforce development initiatives, our free apprenticeships. I'm going to shout out Zach Dime. He was integral in our development of this particular program. He knew of a similar program that IUPAT had conducted in Tennessee. It was in a different location. It was in some of our rural counties, and that was just for the basic adult education. And there were struggles. And they knew that IUPAT was wanting to focus on ESL students in Tennessee involved with certain programs. So he made the introduction, and that was what started all this. He held my hand through completing all the paperwork. He knew the names of the people in the office, so he could check in with them and say, hey, have you looked at the application? Because that's the kind of thing that can be a stumbling block. Even if you do get the connection, it's do you have all of the information on how to complete each of the steps in that approval process?
Great.
Really interesting. I know we do have a few more questions in the chat, but I think it might be helpful to go on to the third question and sort of hear from the program there, and then dive into some of the questions and answers.
Yep. So, Jenny, do you want to read the third question?
Sure. So this one is about what sorts of obstacles or barriers or challenges you might have faced in the process of developing your programs. And we know you had them, so don't pretend that they weren't there. It happens to the best of us. And sometimes that's where the greatest learning happens, right? We think probably some of those on this webinar would just be interested in what some of those were and how you address them. Maybe we can start with Santa Rosa.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for us on the education side, one of the main obstacles that we found was that for the most part, our program is, again, bilingually, mainly Spanish and English, because the majority of the population that we serve are Spanish speakers. And so one of the first things we saw is that students needed to have a certain level of English to be able to communicate with passengers once they become operators. So what we had to do, we all of our materials are still bilingual, English and Spanish, but we do require a minimum level of English for students to participate, because again, for us at the junior college side, there's no problem because everything I do bilingually. I teach a lot of bilingual classes. But once they move on to apprenticeship, everything is in English. So we do need to make sure that they have a certain level of English. And then another thing that we found was that in the first cohort, we had a student who was not authorized to work in the United States. So we needed to go back to the drawing board, implement strategies to ensure that all the information going out for recruitment specifies that students who apply to this program need to be eligible to work in the United States. And this is in collaboration again with Golden Gate, because they're still following federal guidelines for hiring bus operators. So we did not want to give false hope to students who are not eligible to work here in the United States. So we implemented the Golden Gate application with the Santa Rosa Junior College admission application to start gathering that information. And then I'm gonna have Araceli chime in a little bit more on the high school GED portion, because that was another obstacle that we had to overcome.
Yeah. So, like I said, initially we had several meetings well, first, the biggest obstacle for us on the education side was getting familiar with the transit industry. We had no experience in this area whatsoever, so those frequent meetings were helpful with that regard. We also made it a point to visit their facilities, their locations, so that we became familiarized with it, and we understood better. And so that was one of the obstacles we had, was understanding them or Golden Gate and the way they function and the way they do things, and vice versa. They also had to get familiarized with the education side of things and why we needed to do certain things a certain way. As for the GED, high school diploma requirement, initially our program was conducting a CASAS test to help determine the level of English for students. But we found very quickly after that very first cohort that that was not the most accurate way of doing that, or the best way of doing that, because every single student that took that test, that first cohort, failed it. So we went back to the drawing board, we communicated and collaborated with Golden Gate Transit, we went back and forth and tried to come up with different solutions to that issue, and we landed on a skills test. So naturally, when folks apply to become a bus operator, that is part of the hiring process that Golden Gate Transit does. So they came up with a modified version of that would allow students to then take a skills test. And if they were able to pass that, they would waive the high school diploma or the GED requirement. So that was one way that we've collaborated with each other to bring down those barriers and allow folks an opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have. So that's how we get around that. However, the college does offer GED prep courses. And so if they still don't pass the skills test, we might refer them to take some of our GED preparation courses or some of our ESL courses if we see that their English level is not quite there yet as well. And so we'll make that recommendation. Part of our process includes an interview with every single candidate that meets qualifications, so that we can further determine their eligibility and can make appropriate recommendations depending on their particular situation and status.
Thanks so much for that explanation, Araceli. I think it really points out that sometimes these barriers that are identified with adult education participation, we can overcome them. And sometimes what that means is eliminating that requirement or making some adjustments. I know IUPAT has made decisions to not require a high school diploma until the apprenticeship is finished. And this is relevant to one of the questions I see in the chat about acceptance of foreign credentials like high school diplomas. You may have people present with interest in an apprenticeship, lots of ability to do the work, but not being able to meet that diploma requirement if theirs was acquired in another country. There are ways that apprenticeship entry requirements can be adjusted, either to eliminate a requirement that's not really necessary for doing the work or succeeding in the apprenticeship, or else give some time frame for acquiring something. So if someone was going to work toward a GED because their local diploma, their diploma from a home country was not valid in the US, they could be given time to do that. Or there could be consideration of considering some of those foreign credentials. As long as it's documented in the standards for the apprenticeship, that could be made allowable. And it can be a process of that communication and work with the union, with employers, with partners at the table, working on that. Maybe more can be said by the Santa Rosa group about how that's come about.
Mr. Rich?
Yeah, I think that's you brought a really great point, Jenny, and it really is. It was up to the partnership, right? It was up to the group to present it to HR, to the agency, and really pivoting and really understanding, from the first cohort till now, that you continue to develop and you continue to make it better. This group has been real amazing in pivoting and saying, you know what, here are the challenges we're seeing. We're not just going to stick to this and say, if they can't meet this, too bad, right? We're going to meet them right where they are and say, you know what, here is where, this is the black and white. Unfortunately, this is where, the federal regulations of trying to get your license and being able to pass these tests is going to be paramount for your success. I think what we've done I mean, especially on the JC side, right, is they've pre-screened, right, in saying, you know what, we're actually going to do a pre-interview to make sure that when you come in here to Golden Gate, you're going to have the best chance of success, and not saying, we're going to take everyone, right. And if you can't, if you don't meet this minimum qualification here, like Gustavo was saying, let's work on it, right? We're not going to give up on you. We're going to continue to build on you. But at the end of the day, I think what we really want to see is that success, right? And we continue, like I said, we continue to build. We learn from every cohort. And just kind of going back, the conversations that we have, they don't always happen at the meetings, right? We'll call each other and say, hey, how can we better do this so that way we're getting, we're helping the students become more successful before we come to the table, before we come, we collaborate as a group, right? We'll already have solutions that we can present. And what, just one of the other biggest challenges that we face is, sustainability, right? How do we make sure that we can continue to do this for the foreseeable future, right? So really thinking ahead, and like Gustavo said, making sure you're have everyone at the table, especially on the adult ed side, so that they could see exactly, the benefits, because we're not only offering these careers, we're changing lives. We need to be able to highlight that and say, this is not just, about the numbers. This is about this person who is now, is working 2 or 3 jobs now, are, they have a sustainable career and have, union representation and benefits. So really, I think as we grow, just being open-minded and saying that, we can continue to do that, and everyone is still at the table making, decisions, is going to be key to facing these challenges.
Great. We have a few more questions we were hoping to ask. Well, I'm also looking at the time, and I see there are a few other really interesting notes in the chat and the Q&A. One just came in from Paul about how a U.S. Department of Labor, the WIRED initiative, funded career pathway programs to develop what we think of as contextualized basic skills curriculum that's tailored to the industry and the occupations. We're huge advocates of that. And that's where the expertise of adult education, coming to the table and talking to the other partners in apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship, can just be a game changer. Because you speak this language, we can teach the basic skills in ways that are relevant to this industry and that are helping people gain the skills they need to enter this industry and do well in it. So adapting those sorts of curricula that are already out there, or working with the collaborative within the apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship to create that curriculum. It's something we see happening all the time in these partnerships, and it's very exciting. What do we think? Peter, we have 4 minutes left. We have more questions here, but I think we also really want to invite dialogue about this. What are we thinking?
Right. Well, we were told that we could go a little bit over, but we want to be respectful of people's time. So we could, I think let's just maybe kind of quickly try and identify some questions and then have the panelists respond.
Yeah, there's one that just came in that said, when I think apprenticeship, I think of plumbers, carpenters. What are some other lesser known apprenticeships? I don't know if our panelists have experience with this.
I would say ours in bus operators, because nobody thinks of driving a bus as a career necessarily, right? So that was one of the things we had to do, really learn about the industry, educate folks, and advertise it as a career. So that was a challenge in of itself because of that, exactly that comment in the chat. Most people think of apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, and these other industries, not necessarily in transit. So I would say ours.
I'll just add quickly that the bus operator pre-apprenticeship was actually the first one in that particular occupation in the United States. But since then, there are literally dozens of localities that have contacted us to want to replicate that. So there's many occupations that have apprenticeships that are not the carpenters and plumbers and electricians. So again, that's part
Some
of
great
maybe
examples
connect.
have been written in the chat here.
Yep. And talking with your local workforce board will also, they by definition have labor representation on the board, and they would know who to talk to, particularly where there's jobs, because none of this works if there aren't jobs. So that's a good kind of compass heading to pick, is where is their work, because they'll be looking for your students to fill those jobs. So that's one piece of advice, unsolicited.
That's right. Peter, I think maybe we should turn to the remaining slides, make sure people know how to
Yeah,
make
absolutely.
sure. I think
Okay,
we
sure.
could talk for hours about this topic, and
Yeah, right,
those who are on
right.
the panel have stories they could tell for hours as well. Thank you to all those who put your questions in the chat and the QRA. Apologies if we didn't get to answer them all in depth. We're happy to talk to any of you after this webinar. We're sharing with you here. This is a page on our website that has a number of different helpful resources focused on this topic, including the 3 that we showed pictures of. You might want to look there. And then we put our contact information on this last slide. Wanted to encourage people to reach out if you have further questions. And I think with that, we're at a few seconds before the hour. We want to really thank our panelists. We're humbled by your work and inspired by it, and think that some of these models that you're putting in place have so much potential to be replicated and to serve and reach more students, more workers, more learners who are eager to gain some of these skills and get out to work, interested in entering apprenticeships. It's these sorts of partnerships that really make that possible. So we thank you all for being here today. Any closing comments in our last minute?
I see there's
Okay.
a quick poll.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
we also want to thank COAID for highlighting this topic. And again, we're not going anywhere, so get in touch with us if you'd like to pursue a more detailed conversation. We're glad to help.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your National Apprenticeship Day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you guys for taking the time.
Thank you.